Hi, I'm Grace Lisa Concepcion from the University of Asia and the Pacific. In my article entitled Negotiating Land in the Spanish Philippines, Cases of Land Donations and Boundary Disputes in Laguna in the 17th and 18th centuries, I discuss two types of negotiations involving land. The first deals with donations that native leaders made to the Franciscans for the establishment of a hospital in Los Baños in the early 1600s. The second type consists of native claims to land in a dispute on town borders in the 18th century. For this study, I used archival material from the Franciscan Archive in Madrid. This archive houses documents related to transactions that took place in those parts of the Philippines where Franciscan missionaries worked. One of those regions was Laguna. I asked these questions in my article. What were the land tenure practices in 17th and 18th century Laguna? Might there be traces of prehispanic notions of land tenure at work in these negotiations? It has been commonly understood that the Spaniards introduced private ownership in the European sense when they arrived in the Philippines. However, this assumption is an oversimplification that applies contemporary legal notions of private property to those of the earlier centuries. I argue that the cases I look at in this paper show alternative ideas of ownership and depict how the people moved within the colonial structure to prove their land tenure. These cases also illustrate overlapping practices of land tenure during the transition from pre-colonial to colonial forms. Based on this study, it is not accurate to claim that the Spaniards totally changed indigenous notions and practices of land tenure by introducing private property, because, as shown here, natives in the Laguna region exhibited multiple practices of ownership that combined individual and communal forms of tenure, even at the start of the colonial era. Furthermore, the cases illustrate how the natives drew upon customs and colonial laws to claim or donate land. My approach to these cases is inspired by Ricil Mojaras's understanding of Isabella de los Reyes's attempt to produce a version of Philippine history based on fragments of local knowledge and archival material, despite the limitation of these sources. Using fragments of proceedings of land disputes and accounts of land donations, I hope to understand how land tenure practices changed from pre-colonial to colonial. I also try to focus on how local history contributes to giving some nuances to the history of Spanish colonial Philippines. In Professor Mojaras's writings, he thought about the significance of local history and the role it plays in enriching, challenging, and even revising old versions of the national history. Furthermore, he also pondered how refocusing history from national to local enhanced theoretical and methodological practices in Philippine historical studies. As an exercise in local history, my article participates in this conversation by approaching local history using the lens of land tenure in the early Spanish era in a specific region. This approach shows that negotiations between natives and Spaniards on the ground were often disregarded in national history. I hope you find some time to read my paper. Thank you for listening.